and discuss him, there's what can you say about Mark? He was already going to go down as one of the best players in Alabama basketball history. He played a big role last 2 seasons ago on that Sweet 16 team. And then last season, he 21 and a half points a game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal and a half, over 50% shooting, over 43% from three. Just an elite all-around performance on the season, from efficiency, from scoring. In big games when we needed him, he was there. He was absolutely incredible, completely throughout the entire season. And, it's also big to have a guy from the state of Alabama on the team. I talked a little bit about having guys from Alabama, and it's going to be big this season because now you're actually going to have 3 guys from Alabama if you include Youngblood, having been born in Tuscaloosa, Philon being from Mobile, and Jaron from Muscle Shoals. Having guys from the state of Alabama is big because the rivalries mean a little more to them. Playing for the in-state team that they grew up supporting means a little more to them. And you saw that with Mark Sears, right? You saw that when he transferred from Ohio. He had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because he had to play lower level basketball in order to be able to transfer up to a school like Alabama. And now Nate is able to convince him to come back for one final season and use his final year of eligibility to compete for a national title. And it's just absolutely huge. I would say a big reason in this, and Mark has been honest with this, is NIL, right? When you look at the way the NIL landscape has shaped basketball, prior, in order for a kid to be able to make any money, they would have to go to the NBA, right? There just wasn't the money to be made in college basketball. And so when you look at it the way it is today, if he was going to get a shot at a guaranteed contract, right? So a guaranteed NBA contract, you're talking about like a first-round pick, then absolutely he needs to go ahead and go to the NBA draft, right? I think everyone would agree. You've seen Nate say it time and time again. If our guys are going to go first round, I'm not going to encourage them to stay, right? You saw that last year with Clowney, obviously Brandon Miller. Guys that are going to be a first-round pick, he wants them to go. He wants them to go ahead and if their dream is to be in the NBA, then let's go be there, right? Mark Sears, however, has a couple of things working against him. First off, he's just over 5'10 and a half, right? So that's working against him. Additionally, he is older. He's now going to be a fifth-year senior, so he's 23, 24. You're just talking it is an uphill battle for those types of players. And so that's something where typically when you're looking at a player like that, even one as productive as Mark Sears, and I will say the height probably is working against him the most of anything, it is a standpoint where Mark Sears is probably looking at a two-way deal, right? A G League / NBA two-way deal. Those types of deals are paying in the $500,000 range. I'm not going to say the number that I have heard floated for Mark Sears, but just know that it's more than $500,000. And I think that is surprise to no one if you followed any of the NIL market, right? So there's a standpoint where he can make more money at the University of Alabama than he could on these types of two-way deals. It's also a standpoint of when you look at the rest of the roster, right? And we talked about it last episode. Again, you're looking at a roster where, however you want to shake it, there's a possibility that your 3 worst guys are Naz Cunningham, Philon, and Mo Diabate. So Diabate that played big roles last year, Cunningham that's a former number 1 overall recruit, and Philon that's a top 40 recruit, previous Kansas commit, Mr. Basketball in the state of Alabama, and a very elite scorer, over 35 a game when he was at Mobile. So, that's the type of roster at the bottom of your roster you're talking about. Alabama goes 13 deep this season. Now, they're not going to play 13 deep. Nate's going to have to figure out how the roster is going to shake out with minutes. But some minutes that we know are going to be happening is Mark is going to get his minutes, clearly. However, a guy like Philon and guys like Aiden Holloway are going to allow Mark to not have to play the 40 minutes a game, even if you have an injury to a guy like Latrell Wrightsell, like you had last season. I think that was something that really hurt us down the stretch last season. Obviously, him getting healthy, and we learned how to play without him for part of the NCAA tournament, and we're able to win some games without him. But no matter what, Mark Sears coming back is huge for Alabama. Even without Jared Stevenson, I think Mark Sears being back would probably solidify Alabama as being a, potentially number one preseason team in the country. Again, it's going to be Alabama or Kansas, depending upon who you ask and, who the preferences are. Alabama or Kansas are going to be your number one teams going into next season. And Mark Sears is a huge piece of that. It's a great thing that we're going to have him back. It just adds to an already impressive roster. And I will say that the combination of transfers, freshmen, and returning guys, especially with Mark Sears, this is going to be Ned Oates' most talented roster he's had in Tuscaloosa. This will be more talented on paper than the Brandon Miller year, more talented than last season when you made your first Final Four. And the sky is really the limit for this team. Obviously, you're going to have to talk about chemistry. You're going to have to talk about how they play well together, defense, offense, all the things. However, on paper, this is Ned Oates' best team, and it starts at the top with Mark Sears. You're returning a guy that's a first-team All-American. You're returning a guy that's going to be very hotly talked about in the National Player of the Year conversation. There's some debate that he could have even won it last season if it wasn't for a guy like Zach Edey, right? Mark Sears is that polarizing and that incredible of a player that he is going to garner that level of attention, and he deserves it, right? He deserves every bit of the attention that he's going to get coming into a season when he's also, not that he had to shoulder all of the scoring load this season, but he definitely shouldered more of the scoring load this season than he did last season. And I think that with the guys that we are bringing in, he's not going to have to shoulder quite as much of it this season, right? I think you've got some guys coming in that are more than capable scorers. You're returning a guy like Grant Nelson. He's able to play his traditional four. I think that you're going to have a little bit more scoring around him even this season. So I think the sky is absolutely the limit for Mark Sears and the potential that he sees coming into this season.